Chairman Rangel, Ranking Member Camp, and members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be back here today. A year ago, as you know, when the President took office, our nation was facing a deep recession. The economy was contracting at an annual rate of about 6%. The financial system was on the verge of collapse. Credit was frozen. The housing market was in free fall. Millions of Americans had lost their jobs, and the economy was losing jobs at the rate of 750,000 additional jobs a month. And this is very important. When the President came into office, he faced a deficit of $1.3 trillion and projected deficits before a single bill was enacted that, according to CBO, would more than double the nation's debt over the next decade. I want to just say this again. In January 2001, CBO, which is your designated, nonpartisan, neutral scorekeeper, projected 10-year surpluses of $5.6 trillion. In January 2009, before the President stepped into office, those projected surpluses turned into $8 trillion in projected deficits. So let me just repeat that. Over the course of 8 years, we went from the summits of $5.6 trillion in projected surpluses to $8 trillion in projected deficits. That's a swing of $13 trillion. Now, this recession caused tremendous damage, and today millions of Americans are still living with the consequences of that recession. And we all know that the road to jobs, to greater economic security, and to fiscal responsibility starts with economic growth. And today, in large part to the actions Congress took and that we took to put out this financial fire, our economy is now growing again, and in the fourth quarter, it grew at the fastest rate in 6 years. This is progress, but it's not enough. And that's why we need to work together to intensify our focus together on job creation, on investment, and in innovation. Now, when you talk to small businesses across the country, as I know you do, they tell a similar story. They're worried about whether they're going to see demand for their products, and their ability to expand and to hire depends on access to credit. And that's why the President in New Hampshire yesterday proposed new legislation to create a small business lending fund. That new fund will offer capital to community banks that have historically been at the center of lending to small businesses, and we need them if we're going to be able to grow and create jobs. That's why the President's also proposing to substantially expand what the Small Business Administration can do in terms of higher loan limits, lower guarantee fees. We want to extend the Recovery Act provisions and build on those. Now, in addition to helping small businesses get access to credit, we're proposing extensions of Recovery Act tax relief for small businesses. Expensing, bonus depreciation. We're proposing zero capital gains on investments in small businesses, and we want to work with you to design a credit to help small businesses expand hiring. The President's proposal is, and we're open to ideas on how best to do this, is to give small businesses that add jobs $5,000 for each net job they create, and combine that with some payroll tax relief. Now, in the President's budget, we've laid out a comprehensive agenda to invest in innovation and strengthen our economic foundation. This budget is designed to create the conditions for the private sector to grow so that businesses, small and large, can create jobs. To do this, we need serious financial reform, not just to provide better protection for consumers and investors, but to make sure that our financial system is taking the savings of Americans and financing future growth and innovation, not financing financial and real estate booms. We want to encourage American innovation. Last year, we made the largest investment in basic research funding in the history of our country, and we want to build on that and give businesses incentives to invest in R&D and in clean energy technologies. We need to increase exports, and that's why we're committed to working with this committee and with the Congress to pursue strong trade agreements, because the more American businesses are able to export, the more jobs they're going to be able to create in America. We want to invest in education. Businesses in this country need an education system that does a better job of teaching and creating a skilled and productive workforce. And finally, we need health care reform so that we can provide greater economic security for for tens of millions of middle-class families and help reduce the extraordinary cost burden our existing healthcare system puts on businesses large and small. Now, these are reforms the government has to make. If the government fails to meet these basic challenges, Americans will suffer and businesses will suffer. The market cannot solve these challenges on its own. The government needs to address these challenges in order to provide a strong foundation for a dynamic, growing private sector. Now, part of this foundation requires returning as a country to living within our means. When we have strong growth in place, we need to begin the process of bringing down our deficits. These deficits are too high. They are unsustainable. And the American people and investors around the world need to have the confidence that we're going to work together to bring them down when the economy is stronger. Now, the President's budget proposes some important steps towards that objective. Starting in fiscal year 2011, we propose to cap non-security discretionary government funding for 3 years. Second, we're proposing some important changes to our tax system to make it fairer and help bring down those long-term deficits. So we're proposing to allow the tax cuts put in place for the richest Americans to expire, to close what's called the carried interest loophole, so that we're taxing the income of hedge fund and private equity managers in the same way we tax the earnings of teachers and firemen. And we want to eliminate unnecessary, unfair, and ineffective tax subsidies. As we take these modest steps, though, we want to extend the Making Work Pay tax credit, which goes to 95% of working families across the country. We're working to close down the TARP at zero cost to the taxpayer. If you join with the President in passing our proposed financial responsibility fee, the taxpayer will not be exposed to a penny of loss on the actions the government was forced to take to fix the financial system. Third, we have to restore basic disciplines of budgeting that all American families live with by reinstating pay-as-you-go. Any new initiative should be paid for without adding to the deficit. In the 1990s, those disciplines helped move us from a deficit that was 4.5% of GDP in 1991 to a substantial surplus in 2000. Now, this budget outlines a path to bring our deficits down as a share of our economy to below 4% over the next several years. And while government support for the economy is critical now, we can't let our future deficits and debt continue to grow faster than our economy without hurting future prosperity. This is going to be a difficult task. It's going to require tough choices, politically difficult choices. But it's important we work together on that, and that's why the President has proposed the creation of a bipartisan fiscal commission, which will be charged with identifying responsible policies that can win support across the aisle to bring down these deficits. I want to just close by saying the following. The United States economy is in a much stronger position today than it was a year ago. But our challenge is not just to repair the damage caused by this recession. We also have to make the investments that are necessary to our future prosperity. We have not been investing in making the kind of reforms that are essential to broad-based economic growth in this country, and that's why the investments laid out in the President's budget are so important. Now, I know there are different ideas on how best to get the economy growing again and make sure we're creating jobs, but I want to underscore where I think you can find some common ground today. People across the aisle today say deficits matter, and ours are too high. Tax cuts are not free. We have to pay for the programs we propose to undertake. But our priority today is to make sure we're getting Americans back to work and we have the conditions in place for a sustainable recovery. Now, I want to look forward to working with this committee on how best to design and implement policies that achieve that objective. And I want to conclude, Mr. Chairman, just by saying one thing about what you read in the news today about AIG. What happened in AIG was an outrageous failure of policy. As a country, we should have never let a company take on a scale of risk that could threaten the stability of the financial system. And we should never allow the taxpayers ever again to be in a position where they have to pay a penny for rescuing a financial system from the mistakes caused by not just government, but the decisions of people running these major firms. Part of what contributed to this was a set of compensation practices that defied gravity. They were deeply irresponsible. In a simple way, what happened is people were paid if things went well, but they were not exposed to loss if things went bad. And what happened in AIG is the people running that firm, as they were taking on a level of risk we had not seen ever before, they were paying their people on a presumption that they would share in the gains if things turned out fine, but if things went south, they would be protected from those losses. These contracts were put in place in December 2007 and in March of 2008. Before that company, facing collapse, came to the government and said, we need you to help us save us from ourselves. Those contracts were outrageous. They should never have been permitted. And Ken Feinberg has done an exceptional job under very tough conditions. I asked him to come and help us work through this. He's a brave, smart, tough man, knew he was not going to make anybody happy, and he did a very good job of negotiating down those payments and trying to make sure that you did not have any of that kind of stuff in place in that firm or across our major firms in the future. Now, if you join with us in passing this proposed fee on our largest financial institutions, then you'll be able to say, as we do, that the American taxpayer will not pay a penny for what happened in AIG. And if you work with us on financial reform, then we can put in place the kind of bankruptcy procedure we have for real companies and we have for small banks that allow us to deal with future AIGs with not having to face the kind of outrageous things you've seen us have to confront in this process. So our job today is to see if we can find a way to fix what was broken in this economy and in this financial system. We're making some progress, but we've got a ways to go, and we're looking for the best ideas that offer the best bang for the buck to get people back to work, that are responsible, recognize we have limited resources, but understand the deep obligation we have to try to repair what was broken, repair all the damage that was done, and put us back on a path where we can be more, we've earned back the confidence of the American people that they're going to have a more secure economic future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.